a MakerDAO community call. My name is David Utrobin. I am a community development lead here at the foundation and also longtime community member. And I'm really happy to get the chance to lead these calls. And so today is going to be an interesting one. Historically, we have used these calls to do a few things. So we've used it for sharing updates. So we cover the Maker Relay sometimes when we don't have a guest, and we kind of go through current events. And then the other more interesting path that we've been taking is inviting guests and hosting panel discussions. So last week we actually did a panel discussion on the surplus buffer. And this week we're going to be doing a panel discussion on core units. And so just like last week, I've invited a handful of people on the call today, and I'll be inviting them on the screen. And as they come on, I am going to give them a chance to introduce themselves, and then we will jump into the fun. So let me...
Hello. I don't know if you can already hear me.
Yeah, I hear you.
Hi, everybody. So let me see if I can actually share. I managed to share my screen before, but here. Just a second. So I can't find any more.
So if anybody is in the call who wants to come on screen and share some thoughts and talk with us, definitely just ask in the chat. I'll happily invite you. So yeah, cool. Before you share your screen, Imeo, let's do like a quick round of introductions and get everybody to say their name or handle, talk a little bit about what your involvement is at Maker and like what your interest is with the core units.
Right. So should I start? Perhaps. I see myself as the first in the line, so maybe it's the same.
Go first. Go first. That's
I'm just a random community user. So I've been, I guess, I joined the community in 2009. When I discovered this project, I bought a few tokens, MKR, and so I started following the project. And very recently with Juan and the LPro, I've took part of this dedicated group to basically kick off this idea of the core units. The attempt is to try to decentralize as much as possible MakerDAO to reach really the level of decentralization that we hope to achieve in a couple of years, or hopefully even earlier. And that's it. So I'm here today just to speak about this core unit idea and give my opinions on it. So that's it.
Nice. And just to repeat, you co-authored the MIP set with Juan, right? Or you just were a major contributor, or how? What's your role in that?
So I would say, a minor role in a sense. So we discussed a lot together, but it was definitely, at least in my opinion, Juan who did most of the work. So yeah, I basically accepted the invitation to speak here just to express my opinions, not to claim any ownership or anything. It's really LPro and Juan definitely took the biggest cut of the work, I think.
Very cool. Well, Juan was on this call a handful of times. You want to do a brief intro?
Yeah. First, I disagree with what Mio is saying, but I used a lot of help from a lot of people, so I don't want to take credit for it. That said, my name is Juan. My handle was or is Juan because Juan was already taken, I think. I've been in Maker for a while now. I actually worked with David some time ago, and we're still collaborating in different projects together. What else? I don't know. I started reading about Maker a long time ago, found it fascinating, and got sucked into the rabbit hole. That's my story.
Nice. How about Peyton next?
All right. My name's Peyton. I'm Pros11 on the forums, and definitely rabbit hole is a good way to describe it. Juan, I'm still a pretty new, relatively community member. Got involved in November, was when I first heard about Maker, and was just really excited about the idea. Came on the forums, started contributing, and now I help out with governance and some communications as well, and just happy to be here. So yeah, fell down the rabbit hole.
We're happy to have you, man. And then finally, L Pro himself, Mr. Frank Cruz.
Hey, y'all. Yes, I'm Frank Cruz, a.k.a. El Pro, a.k.a. El Progreso, which is a name from the town I was born in, which is El Progreso, Honduras, Central America, for all you geographical fans. Yes, I'm just a Maker community member, which goes to show you that anybody out there who's watching this or is going to watch this can become a community member. And I fell in love with the project back in late 2018 when Rune Christensen came on the Laura Chin podcast. I was learning about alts, right, and things besides Bitcoin and Ethereum. And heard this guy talk. It was a 2-part recording they did actually back then, and it just blew my mind. Just the whole mechanics behind it. I had to listen to it probably like 3 times just to understand governance and what the role of the MKR token is. Even Laura Chen will tell you that she had to do 2 episodes because it's just mind blowing. And the fact that it kept its peg during the 2017-2018 winter meltdown or whatever it was called. Was amazing, right? The way it kept this peg. So that's the reason why I got involved. And throughout this whole journey, I've met a bunch of awesome people, right? So it's been a great journey that I hope to continue.
Yeah, Maker certainly proved itself through the fire after that 2017 crash. And so, Frank, you were also a contributor towards the Core Unit MIP Set. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, so I was part of the working group. Like Iomio said, this all goes to Juan. He's got some amazing brain there in that head of his. So, I gave the input as best as I could. My approach was things I've learned in life, how we should, because this is a decentralized governance, so there is no right or wrong answer to it. So it's an awesome experiment. And very proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, totally. And doing it the most wise way, I think, is like everybody's goal. And so that it's really great that so many people in the community came together to help make this thing happen. And so cool. Everybody did their intro. I believe Iomio, you wanted to share your screen and talk through something with us, right?
Yes. Let me see if Can you see the screen at the moment? Yeah. Okay. So my plan here is to give about 10 minutes of presentation about the ideas of the core units by means of this whiteboard here that you see. And the idea of these core units was posted in the forum as a set of MIPS around 3 weeks ago. And we are very happy that there was a lot of discussion. The community reacted very positively. So I think most of the people already know what it is, basically. So this presentation is basically divided in 2 parts. The first part, we go over through the very basics of these ideas, these primitives, and it's mostly intended to somebody who is not so much involved, okay? So probably none of you. So if somebody sees this on YouTube later on, maybe you can get something out of these first 5 minutes. And then in the second part, I would like perhaps to discuss some points that have not been discussed so much so far. And this is normal because our idea with this proposal was just to kick off the process that the community must do, not any of its initiators, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
we just propose some very, very basics elements, and we hope, and it is happening, that the community reacts by proposing modification and this type of things. So let me start here. I have shown basically in this whiteboard a cloud. This represents the governance. So this is basically the forum activity, the chat, the voting process on chain and off chain, the community calls like this one. So everything that is basically around this governance process. And above the cloud, we have these dots, and they represent the contributors. So these are people that do actual work for MakerDAO. They can be, I don't know, smart contract developers, oracles, sysadmins, governance people, I mean, administrating or simplifying the governance process and like this. So they all do some kind of work. And in a ideal universe, governance would be able to handle and directly communicate with all of them, right? So let me draw a few lines here. So in a perfect universe, government would have sufficient time, sufficient intelligence and knowledge to basically interact with each of these contributors. But of course, it's not possible, right? There are time limitation, knowledge limitation. So not all people voting or interacting in the governance know everything. So for example, they might know nothing about smart contracts. How can they deal with developers, right? So this is completely unrealistic. So let me cancel this line immediately.
And also coordination problems, right? Like that's
coordination problems, absolutely. So there are all kinds of problems. So this was basically a completely naive scenario. So a standard company, I guess. So I'm not, from how to say, personal management or whatever in any company, but my guess would be that a very standard approach will be to structure all the contributors in a hierarchical way, okay? So basically a tree structure. So we would have a boss or some kind of boss. We will have some people under him and some more people. And so this type of hierarchical structure, right? And that makes perfect sense in the context of a centralized entity. But in a decentralized community, this does not work very well, right? So what if this contributor disappear overnight and nobody knows how to contact him because he's never shared his real world contacts online, and half of the tree disappears, right? So that's not a very realistic approach in a decentralized situation. So what can we do really in a completely decentralized situation, which is what MakerDAO is? Well, our idea was to simplify this tree structure as much as possible. So the tree is just composed of one level of children. Okay, so this root here is the cloud that we call governance. And here we have what we call core units. All the contributors are inside these core units. And there is only one person that interacts with the governance, and that simplifies our interaction with the governance, and that is called a facilitator. So in our original proposal, we suggested to have one facilitator for each core unit. The discussion proceeds on the forum, and I believe now the consensus is to have multiple facilitators on potentially a core unit. And the same facilitator can also be a facilitator on several core units. So this is something in progress, something that is being discussed, and that's great. So the idea is that this core unit represents a bunch of people coordinated by the facilitator or the facilitators of that core unit, devoted to a same type of task. So, for example, this could be the let me think, smart contract core unit. Okay, inside here, basically, we do work related to smart contract development. Another core unit will be the Oracle core unit, etc. And there will be the governance core unit, the whatever. Okay, all types of core unit. In fact, I started a forum post, I think, a couple of weeks ago, or even less than that, called "Core Units I Wish Existed," and many people answer with very, very natural and interesting proposals. So yeah, please have a look at that thread if you're interested in what kind of core units MakerDAO would benefit having. Anyway, this is the basic idea. We have a bunch of people working under the control of this facilitator within the context of a core unit. And how does it work, the payment, right? Because people want to be paid actually to do some work. And the idea that we have is that to each core unit, we assigned, let me use another symbol like, I don't know, a symbol like that. And this is a budget. And governance attach a budget to each core unit. And so let me try to depict it in this way, okay? So it's not a great symbolism, but I think it will work. So the facilitators go to governance and ask them for some money, basically a budget. This budget will be approved to the governance and will be attached to the core unit. But it will be the responsibility of the facilitator to pay the contributors inside that core unit, okay? So this allows basically to discharge all the complexity, or the great majority of the complexity of coordination, payments, human interaction, and control of quality, basically, from governance to just the facilitator. Okay, the facilitator is basically in charge of managing a lot of people. You can think of a core unit in some sense as a company, right? So the facilitator's company, but that's a very gross approximation, but that's the idea. The facilitator is in charge of coordinating these people. And I'm going to talk in a second about how this coordination might happen. But yeah, so that's the basic idea. And one important thing is that, this goes into the discussion I wanted to make later on. But yeah, another point here is that the same, so let's see, this guy, let me change color so you can follow me. This same contributor here, the picture might suggest that it cannot work for another core unit. This is not the case. In fact, the same contributor might work for two core units at the same time, okay? Just as a normal person can work part-time in two companies, there is no problem with that, given that this is possible, okay? There might be two core units that have some, I don't know, secrets that they don't want to share with other core units. This might be conceivable. So in that case, that's not possible. But in general, we expect that, for example, if there is a figure like this dot here, this contributor is in charge of doing marketing work within the context of the smart contract core unit, well, it can do the same type of marketing work inside the oracles. So it's not prohibited by any means that we have this scenario, okay? Another thing that I wanted to say is that the core unit itself might, inside of it, might be composed not just of individuals, but of complex entities, like this circle here, or figure, might represent a company, okay? So we might have a real-world company working within the context of a core unit. It will interact with the facilitator, not with the governance, but still will work within that smart contract core unit. So as you can see, this is a kind of trivial in a sense, right? We have three primitives that we are talking about. One is this governance. Governance is a given. We have basically the concept of a budget, the concept of the facilitator, and the concept of the core units. So nothing too complex. This was this choice was motivated by simplicity. Okay, we want to something that can start quickly. It's easy to understand and very easy to modify, and flexible. That means easy to adapt to several circumstances, okay? So there is not much complexity, but this was one of the requisites of what we wanted to do. Okay, so that's basically the end of my first part. I just want to mention that already in the forum, we have several core units proposal, or several are coming. In the chat, many people have not yet posted their proposal, but are very close to do that, and that's great. So I guess in the next couple of months, we will really be able to see the first few core units activated and with their budgets, with their facilitators, and so people really working for MakerDAO in a decentralized way, okay? So not receiving their salaries through anything like the Maker Foundation, for example. Okay, now I want to start the second part with some topics for considerations here. So these are just mine, very personal, and opinions on where this can go wrong, basically, or can go very well. The first concept is the idea, okay, so let me make a box here, and I will call this box, risks, basically. Okay, I want to talk about potential risks of this framework. The first risk, I want to call it failure of a core unit. So suppose that we have one smart contract core unit, or let me talk about oracles, in fact, because that's even more critical, because oracles need to be up all the time, and they cannot go down even 1 minute or 1 hour, let's say. And so failures are very critical. So suppose we just have one Oracle core unit, and for whatever reason, the team disappear. Okay, so they might be stuck in an airplane. There might be at a conference where internet disappear. They might even do something bad. Okay, maybe a competitor paid them 10 millions to just leave MakerDAO in a very bad situation. So this is not going to happen. Just an extreme scenario. Okay, but what would MakerDAO do in that context? We would be destroyed, basically, right? So what? I mean, if the Oracle infrastructure goes down for 2 days, MakerDAO is probably we will need to do an emergency shutdown. Okay. So the conclusion I want to reach here is that it is incredibly important that these core units are not understood as we have one core unit for each topic or for each task, but we need to replicate these core units. So it would be amazing if in a couple of years MakerDAO had 3 Oracle core units. Okay. So let me try to depict it here. So maybe I need to move the screen a little bit. We need another Oracle's core unit. And the 2 core units here might be in competition with each other, okay? A healthy competition. So I think that would be very important. So that would bring costs down for all of us, for MakerDAO, I mean, and also make sure that the best solution emerge. Okay, so this competition, of course, should be positive, not negative. So the core units should be required by governance to interact in a healthy way between each other, exchange ideas, APIs, whatever is needed. But that's an important concept. So this fail really duplicates, as somebody already wrote in the chat, is the consequence. So failure means that we need to duplicate. Okay. The second important concept is the concept of transparency. Transparency is very important because we need to check what these core units are doing to some extent, okay? For example, if the Oracle, just again, it's a very important example, so I'm just taking this Oracle core unit as an example. We want to check if they're actually updating, I don't know, their servers or doing their work, right? Because it would be a catastrophic event if they cannot, I mean, if we are surprised by some bad news. So transparency is very important, and but this fight versus somehow privacy, let me call it this way. For example, transparency does not mean that the salaries of every contributor should be disclosed to everybody on the internet. Okay, that would be crazy, because not all contributors would like to have their salary to be disclosed. And also, as I think Nick pointed out, or either in the chat or in the forum, I don't remember, there are simply very different countries in the world. So a developer from Norway might require 10,000 euros salary per month, or even more, I don't know. The same developer from a less developed country like Italy, I'm Italian, would be happy with half of that, for example, would be very happy. So there is no reason, really, economical reason to pay them the same. There could be a reason, but it's not a necessity, okay? So that's there is a tension between transparency and privacy, of course. But the goal, ultimately, for MakerDAO, we want these core units to work well, okay? So all that the Oracle unit must provide is good work, efficient oracles, and maybe even a product that we can sell to others. That would be the task. But of course, they need to provide, they will be incentivized eventually to provide transparency, because MakerDAO survives only if it can prevent disasters, okay? So there is this tension that we need to find good measure to balance between these requirements. And so that's not something that can be imposed at the level of, any MIP, but it's something that I think should emerge as a culture in MakerDAO in the next year or so. So we will see what happens, and we will learn from hopefully small mistakes and see what happens. Regarding to transparency, I think there is another important concept. We might need, and I think it will be necessary, to have some core units. Core unit here, several core units, as I already mentioned, that I can call internal affairs. Okay, so internal affairs are these thing from American movies where, you know, they check bad cops and good cops and these type of things. But I think it would be very important to have a core unit whose task is to check that other core units are doing very good work. They are not selling our secrets or intellectual property, or they are not disclosing critical information to competitors, or, you know, they are not revealing stuff like that. So it's important that we have something like that, especially in the centralized context where, you know, it's not clear if the ordinary law, government law, can protect us, right? Because we are distributed, we don't even know who is sitting on the other side of the computer. So perhaps coming back to the question of transparency versus privacy, we can respect privacy because that might be necessary to run a business, but we might force facilitators to be more transparent and with people coming from this internal affair core unit. So that's just a consideration. I don't know about that. The third is there must be a system of, the third thing is that we must have a system of rewards here that prevents bad behavior. So suppose that we have two Oracle units in place, right? One in competition with the other. But it's natural among humans to, you know, try to make cartels, or, you know, to just talk with each other and say, okay, I will make this price, you do the same, let's get happy at the same time, right? So we must find a way to give positive rewards in a game theoretical sense to people to act in a positive way. So that's a very difficult question. So let me call it rewards. And these rewards might be in the form of MKR tokens, of course, in whatever technical way we might find, right? So people will be incentivized to do good work because that will push the value of MKR up, and ultimately that will bring them more money than the salary. That's just a possibility. Of course, there will be 1,000 proposals, I'm sure, but it's important that we keep this system of rewards in place because, you know, that's key to the success of a decentralized. I mean, Bitcoin, Ethereum, they all work because they are. There is a nice equilibrium of rewards and, you know, punishments. If you do the bad actors are not rewarded, basically. So everybody acts in a nice way. The fourth is about a code of conduct. So this is not enforced in the MIPs that we have seen so far, because we don't want to force anything at this level of. It would have been surely a mistake to force things. But just for one example, suppose the MKR holders go crazy. Okay, they just want to become billionaires tomorrow, and they ask to mint 5 billion DAIs tomorrow. So technically, this is doable, right? And maybe the market in a crazy bull run might be happy about that. I don't know, but there must be some sort of consideration for the users, okay? The people who are actually using DAI, because eventually, if the system collapses, they are going to pay. So there must be a code of conduct that is not enforced really by rules, but is more enforced by culture again. So I guess that will also emerge at some point. I have no idea how to enforce this in a formal way, but because we are in a decentralized, right? We are out of the law system in a sense. So
Yeah,
it's difficult. But yeah, I think it's important that we understand that facilitators, yes, they need to do what governance tells them, right? But they also have to have some intellectual code of conduct and moral code of conduct that they have to be brave enough to take decisions sometimes. I don't know. That's just a point that I wanted to make. And let's see if I have one last point. Yes, somebody already raised this point in the forum. And it is about intellectual property and secrets in general. So how do we handle these type of things? Because here, these core units will do work, and they do work that sometimes is valuable just as an intellectual contribution. Sure, everything here is going to be, or the vast majority of things here are going to be open source, right? But suppose this Oracle unit, again, as an example, develop some Oracle technology. Who is the owner of this intellectual property? It's MakerDAO, is the facilitator, who is it? Intuitively, we would like to be MakerDAO, right? Because they are working for MakerDAO. So, and how does that work exactly? Because intellectual property is governed by real-world laws, right? So it's not just an Ethereum smart contract. So how does this work? I'm not really sure. So in the forum, somebody, one I think, mentioned that there is a concept at the moment that is called the DAI Foundation. So this DAI Foundation is, I think, is different than the Maker from the, I don't know. So I don't know the details about this, but the general idea, I believe, would be something like the Linux Foundation. Yeah, exactly. This was announced in the MakerDAO blog, I think, about 2 years ago. Yes. So the idea of this, but I couldn't find more information, so I don't know. Sorry, that's my telephone. Well, I'll answer later. Anyway, this is basically something like the Linux Foundation. Should be a non-profit organization.
I mean, okay. Can you like mute the ringer if possible?
Yeah, I just did. Yeah, sorry, it was a bit far away, so I couldn't reach it.
No worries, no worries.
Anyway,
And when you get a second, yeah, sorry, go for it. Go for it.
This DAO Foundation should be some sort of Linux Foundation, hold some intellectual property. I don't know. So I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea about these things, but I want to stress that perhaps this is going to be necessary to talk about this in some details.
So let's take a quick pause here.
Yeah, I finished.
You covered quite a wide range of really, really interesting stuff. So I want to give a chance to Juan, to Peyton, to Frank, to comment or ask any questions around these. And while they get their questions, I know Luis Lazada asked a question in the chat. And I'll just read it out loud for the recording. So Lewis asked, so it's good that the facilitator only asks for a budget and he says he will manage it with all his team, or is there a way to protect the team members who don't want to show their gains? I'm not 100% sure on the wording of that question, but I think I understand the gist of it. Basically, is it okay that the facilitator has that control and that link with governance? And what kind of mechanisms are there in place to prevent a facilitator from abusing that position of privilege?
I'm not sure if he means because he was saying it while Mio was talking about the privacy part. So I'm not sure in which. I don't know. Maybe Luis, you can comment on it. But yeah, as you mentioned, and I don't know, Frank, if you want to go for it. But the way we saw it originally is that we give the facilitator the freedom to and the responsibility at the same time to deal with the budget in the way that they feel comfortable. If they want to form a company and convert the DAI into fiat and pay in fiat, they can do that. If they want to set another DAO for that core unit or DAO or something with more people, they can do that as well. So there are different possibilities that they can potentially choose to go for, and actually, yeah, this system, this model or framework allows this flexibility.
Yeah, totally. And I like the idea of like an internal affairs department that Imeo brought up, because in some sense there has to be accountability for all of these different like independent core units. And whether it is them being very, very public about all of their budget and operations and everything, that's one option, and there's just kind of like a natural accountability that happens in that model. And then there's the more private version, but when there's more privacy, there has to be some sort of allowance to a special party, so that there can be accountability to governance. So I like that internal affairs idea, but of course that's like it's still super early for that, since the very, very concept of core units is still being built into MakerDAO right now.
And also, Luis, thanks for rephrasing the question. Is it better to be transparent or not? So we believe that it is, but we also believe that transparency doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be private, right? So a way of doing this is potentially the core unit facilitator saying, hey, I need to hire 3 people, and I'm going to need a budget of 150K per year for those 3 people, and you don't know how much each people is actually being paid. Point number 1. Point number 2, we're encouraging facilitators to actually have a little bit of a buffer in case something comes up, but also if they need to negotiate or hire someone else or anything that might happen. So you could potentially try to get a budget approved and not use the whole of it. So it's more about eventually you will need to do a report saying we paid this much in salaries, this is everything that we achieved this last month, but it's more of showing value and at the same time showing the money that you've used afterwards.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, and also for me, it was a thing where I think it's important to retain talent, right? Like Juan just mentioned that if you want to attract talent, you got to be able to pay up sometimes. But I also thought about this even after the MIPS were released. And, one way I looked at it was if you work for a publicly traded company from the stock market, a lot of times people want to go after the CEO because the CEO is making millions and millions in stock options, whatever. And these are publicly traded companies, right? So this comes out into the public. But then I realized that I have a few friends, and you guys might have some friends that work for some of these entities, and I don't know what they make. It's not public. And technically, honestly, for me, I don't really care what they make. I don't even care what their CEOs make. But so, yeah, at first I was like, should it be transparent? Should it not be transparent? And then I kind of came around that, it's pretty much up to the core unit. And for me, the most important thing is, again, to retain
It's going to be
talent.
super interesting seeing different core units come about with different models, because we're going to, there's going to be some that decide to make it all public and others that, do more privacy around things like specifically salaries. But I think all of the core units are going to have a level of transparency. Like, I don't expect that any of them would be 100% just opaque. Like the budget is still out there, right? The goal for the quarter is there in the proposal for the budget, and then when it comes around to the next quarter, when Maker has to, reapprove, this next chunk of money, there's all of the information in place. There should be all of the information in place for the Maker voter to say, oh yeah, this core unit is clearly like failing, like very badly, failing mildly, or like achieving and like succeeding and growing, right? Like I expect there should be enough transparency to at least make those kinds of judgments. But for salaries, of course, like it's going to be interesting to see how core units handle it. I think an interesting thing that was brought up was the code of conduct risk, where it's really hard to enforce something by like a law. I know that some companies have like found, they have like bylaws and like they have like their whole internal structure of law. And they have a means of actually enforcing it because it's a centralized company and they could, they have full control over their entire organization. But with this, it's that idea of culture ruling the enforcement versus like an actual enforcement agent, like an internal affairs department or something like that, will be interesting. I'm curious if anybody on the panel has thoughts on that.
I thought that you were going to take it, Frank or Mio, since you were the one listing it. But I can attempt. I can try to. Regarding the code of conduct, it's more. There are different ways of tackling potential risks and issues, and well, David has written a lot regarding the emergency shutdown and different things, so he can probably tell us more about that. But ideally, what we want to promote, especially in the very beginning, is that we do have people and we do have talent that we trust. So the original approach is to trust and then verify, compared to asking for an authorization for everything. So if someone asks for a budget and it looks reasonable, the idea is not to go after them and try to check every single line. It's more of, okay, we'll trust you with this, and then once we see the reports and we see how things are moving forward, check more these things and how every different budget is being used for the different objectives. But that's a little bit the thought behind it.
Do you think that that's going to cause a higher than average operating cost for MakerDAOs, like the different core units, versus like a traditional company?
I'm not entirely sure, but I would argue that that actually we're seeing the opposite. There's an interesting discussion going on in the forum with the governance team going all transparent, all public, with different salaries and different people. One of them myself, arguing that those rates are probably below market. In the case of governance, it's relatively hard to measure and maybe a little bit controversial because we don't have a lot of information about governance facilitators in different companies, right? It's a role that not many projects or companies will have.
What would be the what would be the an analog position? It would be like the head of a board, or maybe like that's the closest one that I could think of.
I mean, eventually it's almost like a CEO, right? It's there making sure that if you see the token holders as a board of directors, it's the one kind of like making the liaison between the board of directors and every single other team. But at the same time, you need to run communications. If you find any company that has a CEO that communicates as much as Long for Wisdom, please let me know. I want to apply there, right? So yeah, it's we might see we might have a slightly like average or above average operations cost. Right now, that does not seem to be the situation, and we'll see it as more core units decide to contribute. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah. And there was a really good question in the chat from Lewis. The core units have to decide their own like periods, right? Whether they want to report and ask for budgets on a quarterly basis, a 6-month basis, an annual basis. Which one is the optimal in your opinion?
My instinct, and instinct is the keyword, so I don't have the data to back it up, unfortunately. But it's I think it's 1 year. That said, if your core unit is new and you're proposing something a little bit more extraordinary, maybe it's better to ask for something less. I think that quarter might be a little bit too much, since you don't want governance to. I mean, probably governance doesn't want to vote every 3 months on the core units, especially if they're working well. So if you trust them and you see the reports and everything's going smoothly, you don't want to start voting on these things. So yeah, as you're saying, David, my instinct is by annual, so every 6 months.
For me. Yeah.
But I wouldn't see a problem with more established core units such as oracles or smart contracts asking for something yearly and then reviewing it on a yearly basis.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I 100% agree. I think that quarterly is just very hard to keep up with the reporting and the proposing aspect. It's just like you have to devote basically the first 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks of each quarter to just making sure that all of the documentation and stuff is really properly done. And also with the fact that there's a governance cycle that requires, at least like 1 to 2 months for things to pass. that also makes it very hard to be on a quarterly schedule.
Yeah, totally.
And I think traditional companies do it annually, correct? They usually put in a budget for the whole year, so usually around the end of December, early January, they're scrambling to get their budgets together. So yeah, originally I was thinking maybe 6 months, but then they came around and it's like just 1 year makes sense. You know, it's just something that, in my opinion, has worked more traditionally. So
I do really
see it
like
work here too.
the point that Juan makes about experience and like, you know, core units that have been around for a while and have proven their competency versus like somebody a little newer with a core unit that might not be as like fundamental, doing something shorter term like a 6-month or quarterly thing. But the fact that this framework actually accommodates for that kind of flexibility is really impressive.
Yes, because I mean, flexibility is important because suppose you are the facilitator of a core unit devoted to smart contracts, okay? You have a contract of, let's say, 6 months or 1 year. But that is kind of frustrating, right? Because how can you expand your business? For example, you would like to hire 10 new people, new coders, but it takes some time to, have them learn the tools and the MakerDAO code and everything. So they will become productive after 9 months, right? So that might not be such a great idea if after 1 year the governance can just decide to shut down the operation. So the facilitator is in a difficult situation in this sense. Do I risk, investing all this money to get new people and then disband the whole group or not? So I think for some core unit, it would be great to have, this evaluation every 3 months. For some core unit, we need to be more of a long-term investment approach because there are some just things that require infrastructure, long-term planning, long-term investments, and we cannot just every 6 months put them in a situation where they could go home, basically. So we have to plan these things accordingly. And also, one thing I think is if we have several core units for the same task, like oracles, I think it's inevitable that this thing will cost more than in a traditional business. In the same way that Bitcoin costs more or Ethereum costs more than Visa, right? They're doing transaction on them. So there are benefits that will come from this decentralization. So we will reduce dramatically certain types of costs, but not all of them. Some of them will rise, right? So ultimately, I think decentralization brings a profit. It's an optimal solution, but not in all aspects, right? So we should expect, in fact, to spend more than an average company on certain things.
Especially to eliminate risk, like with an Oracle's team that's failing, right? Having that redundancy is super important.
I did have a question along those lines. I was wondering if maybe we could get some of the reflection about how the core unit model really allows for that redundancy. Because I think it's pretty easy for us to imagine like a competition scenario, right? Where one group's doing oracles and another group says, you know what, I can do them better, and they compete. But what does like a healthy redundancy look like in the DAO, and how does the core operating unit model kind of facilitate that?
In my opinion, I think that the most important thing is having like a level of transparency around documentation, especially for any core units that deal with more technical side of the protocol. Being able to really stay true to the open source nature of the protocol and the open source nature of of MakerDAO, it's important to be able to have documentation available for anybody to pick up and go where somebody might have left off. That's one aspect of it, in my opinion. And then the other part, which is just an observation for me, is that it's going to be a lot like, bidding on a work contract. Like you're going to have different contractors that are trying to get the same, that same one job. And so I think the historic team is always going to have preference unless they're really failing. And then at some point, I imagine like there will just be a way to propose like a minimum viable core unit that just maybe takes one thing away from the Oracle's team, because the Oracle's team deals with like a whole array of different responsibilities. And so let's say Oracle assessments, right? Like the Oracle team is just, not doing as many as it should, and it's just really lagging behind. Let's say a new Oracle team comes by and takes that responsibility from them. It's almost like, our team lost the bid for that part of our budget, and so I really like that dynamic of even that creating like a fire under people's ass for accountability, right? And for outstanding competence in whatever it is your core unit is doing.
I hope that Nick doesn't get to hear this call, because we're mentioning oracles a lot, and I'm not sure that we're doing a lot of
This is an
justice.
example, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually,
Go ahead, Frank.
I did want to say, retaining somebody like Chris Mooney, switching it up to smart contracts, that's just something that you need to go all out, in my opinion, right? Because he's the type of individual, not just him, Brian, Kurt, which I haven't seen in a while, actually, Kurt Berry, Lolly, so many of them smart contract guys. These are guys that other protocols could easily swoop up because they're just so talented, right? So I would rather pay up to someone like that as opposed to someone who's coming in who we're not familiar with. And I'm not saying there is nobody out there who's not as talented as this team, but just getting back to your question, Peyton, me personally, I'm always going to put my best foot forward as an MKR token holder and voter and governance participant, and look out after those people, because those people really have the passion for the project the same way that all of us here have. So those are the people that I want to retain, and I do hope that we do get more of those. So I would love to have 10 Chris Moonies and 20 Kurt Barrys and Brian's and even Amy's and David's and Juan's. So it's exciting stuff, to be
Also,
honest.
it might be that a core unit that might be on the decline, you never know why it might be, and being able to propose like a duplicate core unit from out of the team, or basically just like replacing the facilitator with somebody else, having that kind of flexibility is also important. Also, culturally, like being able to be okay with those kinds of shifts is important. So, because
Yes, I agree.
it can be very embarrassing, for somebody to get like publicly replaced. Sorry for cutting you off. Go for it.
No, I agree totally. And I think I made a comment on this direction on the application of the smart contract core unit. So they didn't ask a very high budget. So I commented that please ask a higher budget to pay people to duplicate yourself. So I think this perhaps goes into the rewards sort of point that I made earlier. So we should promote this type of behavior. So one of the achievements of the core unit, besides doing a good job, is to duplicate the competencies, the knowledge, the tools, and duplicate itself. So that should be rewarded heavily. And of course, we might check what it means to have a nice, objectively independent duplication. But that should be a core objective, because duplication, redundancy is really the only way to make decentralized things work, right? So all the core units should be incentivized to do that, I think.
Regarding the budget, something that I wanted to add that maybe wasn't very clear, but maybe a creative way of using budgets. A core unit could actually, you can attach more than one budget to a core unit. So potentially you could say, hey, we want to hire these 5 people to do these things. And you could also say, we also want this other budget to create a, radio show with with famous people, and for this we need another 500,000. So potentially governance could say, we do approve the budget for you hiring people, but this other one we don't. So it's a little bit of asking for direction for your core unit by kind of splitting up the different budgets. So that's another another way of using this framework to ask for feedback, kind of.
Yeah, cool. We have about 5 minutes left on the call. Is there any like absolutely important things that any of you feel we should definitely talk about before ending?
Maybe resources, but yeah, if you go to forum.makerdao.com, you'll find a bunch of resources. There are posts explaining what this MIP set is all about. Then you will also find each MIP with comments below and questions and different answers. Something else. There's the core units I wish existed. That's being kind of like a brainstorming section of the forum where people say what they would like to see. So if someone wants to create a core unit, that's potentially a way to start. Am I forgetting another resource? Amy wrote a TLDR for creating a core unit. So the very basic things that you need to get there. And last but not least, there's this channel on Rocket Chat. So if you go to chat.makerdao.com, which is called Core Unit, I forgot the name. But if you Google for Core Unit, well, not Google. If you look within the chat for the Core Unit channel, you will have help. So there's a lot of people helping each other, asking questions and asking for reviews. Like, can you please review this document? We're about to submit this sub-proposal. Can I get some feedback? So there's a nice thing going on. So anyone that's interested, that's a good way to go about it. Okay, thank you, Anna. Core Unit Operating Model Onboarding. So not the best name. I guess when I named it, it was kind of late.
Yeah, I'm throwing all the links in the chat for anybody to want to just go directly in there. One thing I did. Yeah, sorry. Finish. Go for it.
No, I was wondering if there's anything that I'm forgetting, but there has been a couple of calls that we did more specifically with presentations, so you could check those potentially where more people asked questions about this. And then, yeah, if you have any questions, you know where to find us. We're in the forums.
Also, this month is almost completely dedicated to proposals that are in the request for comment phase. There are, I think, over 20 of them. And of those 20, this MIP set of the core units, which consists of MIP, 38, 39, 40, and 41. I think, yeah, so those 4 MIPs are part of the RFC, and I highly recommend, if you're interested in helping shape the way that the core unit frameworks is formally proposed, definitely look through those MIPs, comment on anything that can be improved from the style of the things that are written to the way that this entire MIP set is structured. Also look at the amendments that are being proposed, and I highly recommend you give your feedback. Any feedback will help create a really, really smooth and ideal framework. Yeah, so that would be appreciated.
Totally. And
And so maybe one more question for the last minute for the authors. What's the timeline that you're expecting for formal submission?
So I think we would like to have it submitted in the next cycle, which
For March.
Yes, I think it's the 3rd of March. Can't remember the exact date. Yeah, there's a lot of sub-proposals that already want to go in with the MIP set, so we want to be there to support them.
Right on. All right. Thank you, everybody who was on the call, and thank you, everybody who watched. I hope this was super valuable to all of you. And yeah, this whole last month was all about acclimating to this idea and to how it's going to work practically, and it's been just a total joy from my perspective to see the community, just organize around this, and the fact that we already have 3 core units proposing alongside this framework is just a testament to the fact that this whole idea is a really great one. So cheers to you guys, and thank you for coming on the call.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, David.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.